Hey, shalom, shalom. Welcome to my first official week of my PhD program in Christian history and historical theology. Man, this was a crazy first week, and it showed me so much. I'm gonna get into a story with you of what happened, why it was so meaningful, what I learned, some things I learned in my seminars, and what I'm going to do this next week. And that's kind of how I'm going to structure my vlogs from here on out. A little story of what happened, something I think that was real memorable, what I did or what I learned, and then what I'm going to do or what I'm going to learn in preparation for next week. So, yeah, let's just get into it, right? Like I said, all this is completely unscripted, other than knowing some of the things that I want to talk to with you. I'm just kind of going off the dome. Like I said, that's what I think the purpose of a vlog is, right? To just vlog it out. So this is what happened. And I'm going to kind of structure it around this because a question was asked by a professor that I work with that sort of made everything fit that I could present to you. So that's what it's going to be. So to start out, I had already completed everything, and I told a couple of people of what happened over the past week. But I think the best way to bring it to you guys or to the masses, whatever the masses may be, would be to start out with the question that was asked of me. Like I said, one of my professors at work, he came in and they all knew that I had just finished up my first week in the PhD program. And he asked me, he was like, "Hey, Kobe, how did it go? Right? How was your first week?" And I had maybe about an hour or so before just finished up with my second seminar, still in my first week, but the seminar is like a class. So I had just finished up my second seminar. And so everything was still fresh on my mind. My first seminar was on Tuesday, and that one was in regards to the theology of Martin Luther. Second seminar was on Thursday, 8:30 to 10:30. And that one's about God, the Trinity. So he came in a little bit after that, and I've already had time to digest everything. Like I said, I told people what happened for my first seminar, how it affected me, and my expectations. And that was a question. He was like, "How did it go? Did it meet your expectations?" And I thought about it whenever he asked me this question. Did it meet my expectations? And I responded with a yes and no. Yes and no. I'm going to start with a yes first, right? I'm going to start with a yes on how it met my expectations. Remember, I had just gone to RDS orientation, I don't know, last week. And I met with my supervisor, Dr. Bingham, and he was telling me all kinds of stuff, right? He was telling me how I don't know enough yet, and how we just need to sit down and learn and just get as much information from the authors that we can get. Don't worry about critiquing the information just yet. Just absorb as much as you can, right? So going in with that, he also made mention of what was on the syllabus, how he demands that we read every word on the page, right? No academic reading in his class. You're going to read everything. And is that what we'll get into this a little bit? I guess that's what we'll get into a little bit, because while he, like I said, the professor of my work, he asked me this question and I gave him a yes and no answer, and then I started to explain it to him. But instead of telling you the story, I'm also going to show you and explain the story at the same time. So let me go ahead and share my screen for the first thing so I can share with you some of these notes. So God, the Trinity, First Luther Seminar, share. Oh, wow, this is cool. Okay, so I don't know if I can move it. Can I move it? How is this going to work? Let me see. Sorry. Let me see. Maybe I can move this over here. Or do I make it bigger? Maybe I should swap it over. Yeah, I'll do this here. Make this bigger here. First Luther Seminar. And I can move up and down. Fantastic. Okay, so these are my notes from the seminar. I'm trying to type down everything he's saying, right? He comes in and we get right into it. We don't even really do introductions so much. We do for the second seminar, but I'll get into that one in a little bit. But we get into this first seminar, and he just right out of the gate is he's getting into it. And the first thing he mentions is is very interesting. He says, while this seminar is titled The Theology of Martin Luther, it's a theology of the multi-dimensional context. So up until this point, I had never really considered the entirety of context when looking at anything, right? So when we're looking at Martin Luther or the Reformation or Calvin or whoever, I look at just them, just Luther, just Calvin, just that Reformation period. But I never imagined the wider scope of it, nor did I imagine how wide that scope should be. So he said, you got to understand, from Martin Luther and his theology, it was built as part of his whole context, and there's various layers of what happened that ultimately led him to believe what it was that he believed. And at this point, I had already done my reading. I don't know if I told y'all last week. I was super stressed about it. I had all these pages to read. I was like, how am I going to read everything for God, the Trinity, that book I had, and read everything for the one that he assigned? It was a lot. And I eventually figured out how I can get it done, which is just get it done. Find the time, right? Put in the work. And that's what I've been doing. I wake up 4:30 every morning to get the reading in. And that's just what I have to do to make sure I read all the pages. So I'm reading all the pages of this, and I have my notes and everything. And he explains he should not. He's going into his lecture almost immediately, but not yet in regards to the contents of the book and discussion. Just what he expects from the class, which he kind of gave me a brief idea of when I met him at orientation. So he tells us, Martin Luther, his theology, it wasn't developed in a vacuum. It's a product of its time, its environment, its economy, all kinds of things. And I'm like, yeah, I saw that in the reading, because I did the reading and I read, you know what I mean? I really wanted to ensure that I could be as prepared as I could be, because again, I'm still feeling about this big compared to all the people I met at orientation, all the doctors I told you, the hand surgeons, the ER doctors, that lady that speaks like 37 languages, just everybody, super intimidating. So I'm just trying my best. I was like, the least I can do is read this book as best as possible. So we're not in the book yet, but he's still talking about what we can expect of the class. And he says, and there's a couple of things I highlighted because these are some of the things that I really wanted to emphasize because they stuck out to me. He says, now, mind you, this is a very Baptist, very evangelical, very conservative institution, right? So we should know that out of the gate. There should be no, well, maybe they're this or this. No, they're just what's called self-aware. And I'll get into that in just a little bit. So he says, all evangelicals, despite how they may present it, has a theology that is multidimensional and contextual of its time. There is no theology that comes straight from the pages of the Bible. All theology is filtered through lenses that are of their time. And again, I'm getting an understanding of this because I had just read through the Age of Reform, where when we're studying Martin Luther, in like, what was it, the 1560s or something like that, we go all the way back to the 1250. That's when we start. That's a big context. I barely touched on Luther in these past couple of days of reading. So it shows you how far back you got to go to really get the context. So he's saying that no theology comes straight from the Bible. It doesn't happen. It's a product of its time. And then he mentioned this, as I said, he said this in orientation too. He said that evangelicalism has preconditioned us to argue and prove our position to be superior. It has preconditioned us to be apologetic and polemical. But we are scholars. We must resist that urge and seek to understand first. And like I said, then at orientation, they are really driving it in us that we're not the same anymore as we once were. As an undergrad, as a master's student, as a lay person, just what they call armchair theologians, they're different, right? They most of them are apologetic in some form or fashion. Everybody wants to be right? Not here. They don't want us to be right yet. We don't know enough to be right. So they said that, even he said specifically, Dr. Bingham, evangelicalism, it's preconditioned to make you think, number one, that you are correct and superior in thought, and number two, to be polemical or apologetic in nature. You got to show people how you're right. You have this sort of bravado about you, how you're just, you just got this sort of demeanor about you, and you can see it in a lot of places. And so he says all this, and it's funny because I send this to some friends and we're kind of laughing about it, and some people didn't take too kindly to it, but it is what it is. I'm going a little bit more with that in a little bit, but so he says that, and he prefaces everything with those two statements. Uh, so it's not apologetic or polemics. What is it, right? He says he wanted to talk about what it means to read critically. And what he says is to read critically means to read hermeneutically, not to argue, not to critique. We're here to understand what the author is saying. Remember, respect the text. That's what he said all the time. Respect the text. He said, our main purpose in our discussions is hermeneutical, not apologetic. And I found it interesting when he said this. He was like, he said this, go to an apologetics class if you want to prove how right you are. Uh, and I was like, man, that's great, because I am so tired of apologetics. I'm glad we just get into the information. Um, so reading entails comprehension, completing prior to class. You got to have all the pages read before class. And then you got to make a valiant attempt to comprehend. And he says it again. A lot of this is just reiterating what he told me at orientation. Now he's telling the whole class. He's saying, in my class, skimming does not count as reading. You must read every word. Your mission is to understand what you read, and your notes should reflect that you understand. Then he goes on what he expects when we are leading discussions and what kind of questions we should ask. We start talking a little bit more about Martin Luther and how evangelicalism at its core is a political movement, and the theology of America is politically motivated. And the reason he brought that up is because he's drawing a parallel in between the theology of Europe and the Reformation and back then, and the theology of America and Protestantism and evangelicalism today. How neither one of them were developed in a vacuum. Neither one of them come straight from the pages of the Bible. They are both a product of our time, our culture, our political context, our economy, our religious context, everything. A lot of things go into why they believed what they believe and why we now believe what we believe. So he's talking all this stuff. He's saying all this. And then he gets into the notes again, right? And he says proper note taking is not writing good in the margins of your book. You must take cogent, and I had to look that word up. I actually wrote that here. Cogent notes. Now he says that while we're in discussion, if our insights are lacking, that he reserves the right to collect our cogent notes. He wants to see that we're actually reading and actually taking good notes. And so I'm like, oh Lord Jesus, right? Like I'm already feeling insecure about my reading comprehension, making sure I'm doing it right, and then my note-taking abilities. I don't know if I'm doing them right. So I had in my mind, while he's giving all these directions and instructions, while he's giving all these directions and instructions about how our notes got to be good and how we have to really understand what we're reading, I'm thinking, I was like, no one's looked at my notes. Maybe I can send my notes to Dr. Bingham's TA, who's there in class, making sure everything's going good. Maybe I can send him my notes and ask him, hey, am I taking good notes? And then I think, you know what, that may take some time. Maybe I can go to one of my professors here that I work with, who was also a student there at Southwestern at a point in his academic career. Maybe I can ask him, what do you think of my notes, right? All this is running through my head because I'm a little freaked out. This is overwhelming. I see all the people in class. That hand surgeon that I was talking about, he's also in my class. I feel insecure. So I'm questioning it. I'm staying this call. I'm questioning if I'm doing things right at all. And so we get through all this, and let me see. Maybe I should just show you my notes on how I do things. We get through all this, and we take a break, and then he says, whenever we come back from the break, we'll get into the information of the book, into the age of reform. So we take our break, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do here? Like, I'm feeling overwhelmed already, and we're halfway through. We just did what to expect from the course. I'm freaking, honestly, I'm freaking out a little bit. So then we come back from break. And Now, mind you, all this information, this is why I told the professor that I work with that it did meet my expectations, because I expect a PhD program to be really, really hard. I want it to be tough. In a sense, I want to feel overwhelmed because I want to feel challenged. I don't want PhD programs to be watered down just so we can pass. I don't want that. I want it to be rigorous. I want it to be tough. I want people to fall out. You know what I mean? I don't want everybody to make it. I mean, I pray that everybody does make it if they get, if they can push themselves towards the end, but I don't want anybody to be walked through. I want them to make it because they're working hard, right? That's what I demand of myself, and that's what I demand of others. Don't water it down to help me get through it. Keep the standard here, and we must meet that standard. If we don't, we shouldn't be there, right? This is a new level to me, and the title of doctor I respect so much. For people who call themselves doctors who aren't doctors, it really, really gets to me, right? My wife has told me about some people that do that. I know some theologians that do that, and it really gets to me. Regardless, though, so I told the professor that I work with, in that respect, it did meet my expectations. It does seem tough. It does seem rigorous, and it does seem like I'm gonna have to push myself to to stay afloat, even, right? Much less excel, but I want to excel, so I'm trying to do the most. Now, where it didn't meet my expectations is what I'll talk about now. So we get into the discussion, and Dr. Bingham is asking, what is the main argument of this book? What's up? Maybe I can I let me see if I can show you the book, so you can see what I'm talking about. So, oh, stop presenting. Maybe I could have just presented something else. I don't really know how this works too much, so sorry. Let me see, is it this one? Entire screen. Let's just do this, and I will switch it over. Share my screen anyways. Minimize. And then I'll do this one, bring it over here, make it big, and go all the way to the beginning. Oh my gosh, there's got to be a quicker way. There we go. All right, so let me make it a little bit smaller so you can see. So we're going through the class already, and Dr. Bingham says the first thing you should notice is the title of the book. The title of the book lets you know already what the author is, what his argument is, and he's really breaking this down. Like it's really serious the way he's doing it. He's not just telling us, since this is the name of the book, let's go ahead and read it and then we'll figure it out. No, he's dissecting this. For example, he says, what's the title of this book? And we're like, somebody was like, well, the age of the reform, right? The age of the reform. He's like, okay, but what do you see in there? And someone said reform, and someone else said the age, and he was like, exactly, age. What does that say to you? The age. And then he's trying to get us. Not many people are talking because I think everybody's still a little nervous. I didn't say anything for a little bit. I'll tell you when I came in and said something, but he said it's an age. It's not a specific period. Like how I was telling you earlier about when I looked into Martin Luther or John Calvin or the Reformation in general, I would look at the immediate context of the Reformation, right? Like the 1500s. The age of the Reform, he's saying that's what spans from 1250 to 1550. It's a long period of time. In addition to that, he says, so what comes after that? And then someone says the intellectual and religious history of late medieval. And he was like, okay, but what does that mean? Let's break these down. So I'm telling you, he's getting very in-depth with it, breaking down the words to get you to understand the argument that the author is making before we've even opened the book. And this is super deep, right? This is super deep for me. This is super in-depth. And but he asked the question, and this is where I started to kind of lighten up. He says it's an intellectual and religious history. And he says, who are the intellectuals? And let me see if I can make this half and half because I want to show you my notes that go along with this. Age of the Reform. Chapter 1. Actually, I can go to the 6 categories. He was like, who are the intellectuals of this? And when reading this book, there's like a dichotomy between the intellectuals and the lay people. And the thing is, the intellectuals were the clergy, the high class clergy of the time. A lot of the early theologians that you hear about would be the intellectuals, right? Like Augustine would be an intellectual, Anselm would be an intellectual, Boethius would be an intellectual. All these, I call them shot callers. All the shot callers are these intellectuals. And I was writing this in my notes, so I knew them, and I wrote down who these intellectuals are and their methods and stuff like that. So all that to say, he asked, who are the intellectuals? And I said, it's the high class clergy. And sorry, I cracked my knuckle there. He was like, so wait, the intellectuals weren't in the universities? And I was like, no, they weren't. And again, no one's really saying anything. But I'm like, no, they weren't in the universities. And I looked for, where was it at? Chapter 2, chapter 3. I think it was in chapter 1. Maybe I can do this. Control F. Where is it? Is it anywhere? I don't know where I put it exactly. Intellectual. I don't want to go to, man, I really wanted to show you this, but I don't want to go too much into it. See here. Oh man, now it's making me look bad, but I promise I was prepared that day. Oh well, I had it in my notes here. I didn't have to show that. Well, actually, I didn't show him any of my notes, but I know when I said it, I was in response to something I had written down, because it was this individual that was able to here it was, because it's not university, it's school. It was right here on the first page. I thought so. My bad. So what it was, he was like, so I was telling him the intellectuals were the noble clergy. And he was telling me, he was like, so the intellectuals were not in the universities? And I was like, no, because there wasn't really any universities yet. It wasn't until a little bit later when someone decided to start building up schools. And it was Charlemagne. He gathered up riches for himself and allowed him to build a in his school, or in his palace, he built a school, and that's when he started teaching and things like that. So that was to say that I had it in my notes, like right here in the beginning. And so we kind of went back into the title, The Intellectual and Religious History of Late Medieval and Reformation Europe. And he's talking about it. He starts to get into sort of his own explanation. He's not really asking for much dialogue for a little bit, but he's getting into it, and he's talking a lot. And I'm not taking a whole lot of notes from this point on, because I already had it. See, the age reform time period, Christianity. The intellectuals were noble clergy, not common man. They did not take place in the university. So yeah, I'm kind of writing down what happens. But then he starts talking, and I didn't write a whole lot because I had a lot of this already in my notes. And it's something's kind of becoming apparent to me, and I'm kind of freaking myself out because I already have this written down as he's talking about it. And then there was a turning point for me. There was a turning point. He asks, so what is the thesis of this book? What is the main argument that Ozement is trying to make? And again, I'm waiting, because I think that first question that I answered, beginner's luck, right? Beginner's luck. And so I'm waiting, and he says, what's the thesis of this book? So I wait about 5 seconds, 10 seconds. I'm like looking around, no one's saying anything. 15 seconds, and Kobe, what do you got? And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, man, this is literally the first question I have. I have 6 questions. I'll get into that, but this is my first one. So the thesis, I say, this book interprets the intellectual and religious history of 1250 to 1550, arguing that the Reformation emerged from the interplay between everyday social realities and the ideas of influential individuals and the movements. And I added a little bit more because I knew a little bit more since I had written this. And I was so quick with it. I understood it. He knew that I knew it. And I was really surprised with myself that I got that, right? And so class goes on a little bit more, and someone asks a question based on something that I said. And I don't really know what it had to do with what I said, but he did mention my name. He said, Kobe said this, and he asked this question. He asked, actually, I'm not even going to say what he asked. I'll just Now I have to for the story. So he asked, based on what Kobe said, I don't know how, he said, how did people then know who was a true Christian? And in my mind, I'm like, what? Like, what? I don't mean to sound mean or whatever, but I'm like, that really doesn't have anything to do with anything. And I mean, it doesn't address that in the reading at all. So I'm questioning honestly if he did the reading, but I know the book doesn't address that. But this is getting towards the end of the class. So Dr. Bingham, he entertains the question. He was like, sometimes it was as simple as adhering to specific creeds or doctrinal formulas or practices and things of that nature. And we got about 2 or 3 minutes left of class, and Dr. Bingham was like, does anybody have any comments before we go? And I'm like, yeah, I actually do. I think it's even easier than that to distinguish oneself as a Christian early on. And this is back to my notes. Early on in the book, it says that in this period, Western people, and this is before, this is 1000 to 1300. In this period, Western people began to assert their identities as they came to know and impose themselves on others. Two larger developments made this possible, but this first one, I told him it was actually easier than that. It wasn't even, you didn't even have to adhere to any creeds or perform any religious practices. How they determined who was a Christian? You called yourself one. That's it. It was as easy as that. And for those that they think weren't real Christians, they just said they weren't real Christians. It was as simple as that. It was identity boundaries. Whoever wanted to be a Christian was, and whoever they didn't want to be part of their group, they said they're not that. And he was like, yeah, that's a very good observation. They oftentimes they were just setting up boundaries for themselves and sort of making factions and gangs, you know what I mean, for lack of a better word. And that's how they distinguish. And he was like, okay, class is over. Be sure to do your reading for next week. And I'm like, okay. And I walk out of class. I'm done with this. Let me go ahead and stop sharing this. I'm done with class and I feel great. I feel Tony the Tiger great, right? I open the door to my office and I walk out and I feel like I'm walking on cloud 9 because I was so worried leading up to this seminar that I worried that I'm not even supposed to be there, some real heavy imposter syndrome, to realizing that I honestly think I knew the information better than anybody in the class by far. I don't know that I have to turn in my notes to check if they're good or not, because everything that needed to be spoken about is in my notes. And it made me feel really good to be that prepared. So prepared that the people that I was intimidated by, I was actually engaging more with the questions that they asked. It was a big turning point for me. And I was like, wow, I think I'll be okay. I think I'll be okay. I might manage. It'll be hard, but I might manage. I'm doing fine. Right? I'm doing fine. So why it didn't meet my expectations is because I believed that everybody was going to be higher than me. I thought everybody was going to, I thought I was going to be the one to not answer any questions and just sit back and listen and hope to glean from the smarty pants in the class, right? And just hope to maybe just, I don't know, partner up with them at some point and see if I can get through it. But it seemed like I'd be the one that people want to partner up with, which is crazy to me. Absolutely crazy. So the day goes by or whatever, and I'm about to ride to drive home, and the most awesome thing happened. My wife actually asked me to stop at the store she wanted me to get some chips or something for Priscilla, my daughter. And I was like, okay. So I stop at the store on the way home. And when I stop at the store, I check my phone and I see that I have a notification. And I checked this notification and it was awesome. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Let me go ahead and share it with you. It was an email. Oh, not this one. How can I move that over? This is for a little later on in the story. So this one. Share this tab instead. All right. So this is something. This is an email that Dr. Bingham sent me. And I know it's just a little email. I know it's not like a big deal, but to me, this meant the world. He sent me an email and he said, Jeremy, you did very well in seminar today. Insightful contributions demonstrating that you took the reading seriously. Well done. When I tell you that I felt like I wanted to cry, man, everything leading up to this point, and again, I know it's just an email, and I know it was just one seminar, but I did not feel like I even belonged in this place. And here I am getting, number one, I killed it in class, and then the professor took time out of his day to tell me that I did a good job. Refreshing, reassuring, validating. It let me know that, like Kobe, job's not done, but I'm doing the job right. So I emailed him back and I was like, man, thank you for saying that. Now I know that I'm doing what I need to do, and I can continue doing it without letting the enemy talk in my ear saying, you can't do it, you shouldn't be here. So it meant a lot, and it changed the game for me a little bit. So let me stop sharing this. So that was the first big thing. That's why it met my expectations, why it didn't meet my expectations, and a game-changing moment for me. So minimize this. So then the next day, and things will kind of get faster from here. So the next thing is Thursday. I have my second seminar on God, the Trinity, and share this, share entire screen. This one, share. All right. So, and same thing. We're going through the syllabus. And he's telling us what we expect. But by the way, we already had an assignment. I told you we already had an assignment due by that morning, and it's our critical book review. Now, I found out the day before that with the critical book review, they already have a template. So I had already had all the information prepared, but I hadn't formatted it according to the standards of Southwestern. So I found this template, thank God, and I transitioned all my information that I wrote to the template to make sure it was sent right. But again, same thing. I'm like, man, did I do this critical book review right? Like, I don't know that if I didn't know that if it, I wasn't sure if it was up to standard. Right. But then I got another surprise email, and this was from another student in the class. Where'd it go? This one. Can I share this? How would I do that? Stop sharing, present. Not that one. Share this tab instead. So this was from another student. And there's a direction. If you look over here, well, you can't see it, but I'll show you in just a second. But there's a course requirement. Part of the instructions say the participant shall submit a copy of each written assignment to other participants in the seminar and to the seminar professor the day prior to the presentation date. So I understand why this student sent this email. They said, here's my book review for tomorrow's assigned reading. If I'm misunderstanding the syllabus, it was not supposed to share this, please disregard. So I get it. It was an accident on their part. Stop sharing. It was an accident on their part, and that's okay. No big deal. But it allowed me to see something, which was also it gave me more validation. Entire screen. Share. You can see that instructions on where they got that incorrect instructions from here. They sent that email, and I looked at the email and I looked at the report. I kind of had to. I wanted to see how my report measured up to their report, and I was right on par. So I'm like, great, fantastic. So I turned in my assignment right afterwards. And I felt good about it because it was the same type of report, different words, different all that stuff. It was mine while they did theirs, but it was based on the same book and it was along the same lines, same formatting, everything. So I knew that I was also doing that correctly, and it made me feel good. It was another validating point for me. But this is where we should have looked. And the question that I had was for this. It says 6 written book reviews. However, in the schedule, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's more than 6 books and more than 6 meetings. So one of the questions I had was, well, which 6? And we eventually got to that. But one more thing I want to highlight while getting into this, so I can talk about being self-aware, is Dr. Yarnell also started class by saying we cannot presume everybody understands terms that we use. And the reason he's saying that is because he's getting into some very technical terms. But he says a couple of things. He says that we must reclaim Nicene Christianity in modern evangelicalism. I put that in my notes. I held on to that. I wanted to come back to that. He starts talking about some more things. He says, you must read this. And it's in our syllabus up here, that since this is an advanced research seminar, the professor assumes the student has some familiarity with the major Trinitarian treatises during the more basic level course. Now, I didn't take any basic level course, so I got to go through. I highlighted these so I can read them. And so I put this over here in caps. Read this. Gregory and Augustine. And he said something very interesting. He said, after you read these works, you'll quickly realize how you were incorrectly catechized. So he used that word catechism, and it triggers something in my mind that I wanted to come back to a little bit later. And he is talking a lot about the modern state of evangelicalism and how they've kind of lost touch with the traditions of the church. Now, again, Dr. Yarnell is straight up Baptist, straight up evangelical, straight up conservative. And you can tell by the way he describes God. He's like a no BS type of professor, and he has his beliefs, and that's what it is. But at the same time, he's very self-aware. He understands the shortcomings of his belief system denomination. And I likened it to me being a Cowboys fan, right? I just saw that documentary of the Cowboys on Netflix, and I thought it was very cool. So I don't know, maybe that's why the analogy is fresh on my mind. But I'm a Cowboys fan through and through, right? I got the stars tattooed on my arms. I am a big Cowboys fan. But I'm also very aware of what we are. We're at best, I think if you look at the entirety of their record for like the past 10, 15 years, they are a very mediocre team. Their overall record is 8-8. We can't really say anymore because there's 17 games in the season, but you know what I mean? They're even. They're not good. They're not bad. They're like the purgatory of football teams. They're just there. And I understand our shortcomings. I understand what, Jerry Jones may be at fault for a lot of things. We always have a bad coach. Our players don't show up in the playoffs, if we even make it to the playoffs. When we lose, it's in a spectacular fashion. But at the end of the day, I am still a die-hard Cowboys fan. And that's what I think it means to be self-aware. You can be Baptist, you can be an evangelical, you can be a Protestant, but no, there are faults in your framework and your systematic theology and your thinking and your denomination. It's just the way it is with everybody. Everybody has faults in their specific worldview. The key is to identify those faults, be okay with them, and try to figure out ways to still adhere to the major tenets of that faith. And I think that's what he was doing. Another friend that I sent this to, because I got some friends that I'm sending this to, shout out to the Big Brain Back Chat. But I was telling him, and one of my friends says, it seems like your professors are very anti-evangelical. And I was like, no, I think what it is I think my professors are so conservative, Protestant, Baptist, evangelical, that they are very self-aware of the people that are also Protestant, evangelical, Baptist, conservatives. They know they believe a certain way, but that's for those at like the master's, bachelor's, lay level. We're different. We're doctoral students now. Don't look at it like that. Be aware of your shortcomings and don't worry about trying to fight against them or trying to come up with excuses for why it is the way it is. Just accept it. Understand that this is just what your denomination or your worldview believes, and move on. It's okay to have shortcomings. I'm still, like I said, I'm still a Cowboys fan. Shortcomings and all, and there's a lot of them. Same thing for being Baptist or evangelical or whatever. So I thought that was very interesting. And I was going to tell this whole story of what I learned in this class, and I don't know that I really need to, but one thing that I would like to say is how Dr. Yarnell, how he said that we must reclaim Nicene Christianity, and then he said that stuff about the catechesis. I asked him that question while we were in break. I came back a little bit early, and I asked, Dr. Yarnell, you said this, and then you said this. What does proper catechesis look like to you? And then he told me, go back and you read the Jerusalem, what do we call him? Cyril of Jerusalem and his Jerusalem lectures or something like that. And then he gave me this story. He was like, back in the day in the early church, what they did was most people got baptized on Easter Sunday. Now, a few weeks prior, leading up to Easter, they would teach you about the baptismal formula in which you were about to go through, right? So they would teach you about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, their roles, what they meant, what you mean now that you are going to be in Christ. And they called that the traditio. Traditio? Where did I write that? Yeah, traditio or tradition. And I have all this here. Traditio or tradition. And as they would walk through article by article, working up to Easter, they would eventually proclaim their faith in the triune God they just spent weeks learning about. And this was called the raditio, or the response. And he said, in fact, and after this, I'll stop about right here. But he said, after this, he said, so later creeds like the Nicene Creed developed out of these baptismal lectures. He said, in fact, that's how the church fathers could distinguish between orthodox and heretical teachings. And he brought up Irenaeus. He said, according to Irenaeus, if it aligned with the traditio, or those lectures that they taught people prior to baptism, the traditio of what was passed down, it was orthodox. If it didn't, it was like they took the mosaic of the kings. Jesus, mosaic, I don't know if you know what a mosaic is. It's like those pictures that are made of like a bunch of rocks put together to make a bigger picture. He said it's like if they took a mosaic of the king and rearranged the stones to form a portrait of a dog. Basically saying that they took all the orthodox teachings of the church, messed it all up, and presented a new idea. And that's what was considered heretical. And I was like, wow, this is pretty interesting. And then he ended it with this, right? Students are starting to come in already. The break has been over for like 10 minutes, but he's kind of going on and on about this, and you can tell him it's meaningful to him. So he says, this is Dr. Yarnell. He says, people will say, well, I just believe the Bible. You remember what Dr. Bingham said, that no one's theology comes straight from the pages of the Bible, right? It's all filtered and whatever. He said, people will say, I just believe the Bible. And Dr. Yarnell says, B.H. Carroll, our seminary's founder, he had a saying. He said, I don't care too much that you say you believe the Bible. Everybody says that. I want to know what you believe the Bible says. And he mentioned that evangelicals today have lost a lot of the canons, and not canons like the 66 book canon of the Protestant Bible. Canons are biblical truths, not books of the Bible. If you look at the Council of Nicaea, people think that that's where they came up with the Bible and put together, or the canon of the Bible. No, I think they got that because they did talk about canons at Nicaea, but they were about biblical truths, like canon 1, canon 2, canon 3, and they each said different things. So that's what he was talking about, and that's what I was going to share. I kind of had more for my friends or whatever, but it's not really relevant to this. I just kind of wanted to show what happened then, what met my expectations, what didn't meet my expectations, why I feel so good about the first week, and why I feel good going forward. So, that was my first week, and going on into next week, starting today, this weekend, in preparation for class on Thursday, there's a few things I got to do. So first and foremost, let me share this one over here. I wonder if I should just keep sharing the entire screen. I'll do that. I'll keep sharing the entire screen. Share. So First and foremost, I got to finish reading this book. So I finished reading the first 5 chapters for our first class session. Oh, come on. Taking forever. I'm just trying to go to the, okay. So I read all this up until chapter 5, well, up until chapter 6 for the first lecture. And now I got to finish it up. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'm about the middle of right here. I'm on like page 260 or something like that. So I got a timeline written out, and I'm being realistic now. I'm being realistic. I know that I can really only read thoroughly as I want to do good in class, about 20 to 25 pages an hour. So I have it written out. I got to be at 280 pages by this time, 300 by this time, 320 by this time, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to knock out all these pages today, do all my notes, make sure they're all summarized or whatever. And then I'm going to get into, where's this other one? In the syllabus, I got to, where's it at? Oh, you can see it. Okay, so for the syllabus, there's a couple of things. We're going to be on week 2. So I got to read Brandon Smith's The Trinity in the Canon. I have that one right here. It's about, was it 450 pages? It's about 450 pages, 460 pages. Yeah. Now, the thing is, this is not Dr. Bingham. So in Dr. Yarnell's class, I can pick which 6 books I want to do a critical review on. So I don't have to read all of them like as thoroughly as I would have to for Dr. Bingham. I can academically read this one. So I'll be able to go through these 460 pages maybe over the course of this weekend. It's Friday, so maybe Saturday and after church on Sunday. But today, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow, I at least want to be able to answer those 6 questions. If you remember my 6 questions I have, like in the Age of Reform, I have the thesis or central question, what's the book about? The scope and structure is a brief note on the period, geography, and arrangement. Methodology and sources, key methods, approaches, and source type, key arguments and turning points. These 6 things. And I answer these for the books to make sure I understand what the book is about. And I think I said it last time, before I even finish the book, I know what it's about because I answered these questions. I want to be able to answer these questions with this book, and then I'll go through the book and read it academically, which means I won't have to go through every single word, but I'm going to get a good grasp on it because I love the way Dr. Yarnell was presenting the Trinity, and I want to be insightful in class as well. So that's about 450 pages. Finishing up the book for, move this over. Finishing up the Age of Reform, that's like another 200 pages. And then to end off, because Dr. Salelli, the president of my seminary, he told me that one time I tried to flex on him. He came in to check on me one day. He was like, Kobe, how you doing? Right? This was way before I started my PhD. Not way before, but as I was finishing my MDiv. He was like, Kobe, how you doing? And I'm like, good, good. I'm back in my routine of waking up early and doing my reading, and I'm back to reading my weekly 350 pages a week, right? And he looks at me, and this is one of the best pieces of advice that's also been validated by other academics. He looks at me, he's like, Kobe, you got to pump those numbers up. He was 350 pages. That's not enough. At the doctoral level, you should be reading 1,000 pages a week. And I'm like, what? How can anybody read 1,000 pages a week? Ridiculous. I know now not to disregard anything Dr. Salelli says because he knows what he's talking about. And there was validation from other academics that I know. There's this one guy, Dr. Joshua Bowen, who's an Assyriologist. And he was telling a story one time whenever he was getting his Ph.D. over at Johns Hopkins, and how him and his friends would spend all night in the library reading their 1,000 pages a week. And I'm like, wow, so this is a real thing. You at the doctoral level, you got to be reading 1,000 pages a week. So all that to let you know why. I got about 200 for the Age of Reform. This one I really got to get into, right? No academic reading, really reading. Academically read the Trinity in the Canon, make sure to answer those 6 questions. And then I didn't take the earlier classes to get a basic understanding of Gregory, Augustine, and Thomas Aquinas. So I have a whole bunch of resources on my Logos, and where you at Logos? So I have them all set up already too. I got my I have my Gregory and his five theological orations. I got Aquinas and his Summa Theologia, where I can go through those questions, and then I got Augustine on the Trinity, book 15. Now, all these pages together, I think I saw are about 250. So I have 450 plus my 200 plus 250. That's about my 1,000 pages for the week. So I'm going to go ahead and knock those out. Number one, first today, first and foremost, right after this, I'm going to get into that Age of Reform. I should have that finished by Sabbath tonight. And then I'll get into that Trinity book, answer those 6 questions, academically read through it, and then I'll get into this. I don't want to have a better understanding of Thomas Aquinas, Gregory, and Augustine, just so you know. I got to have the basics down. He said everybody, this is a direct quote from him. He said that everybody at this level needs to have an understanding of these writings. You should have a copy of all this in your library. This is, I don't know if you know the Nicene, anti-Nicene, Nicene, and post-Nicene writings. It's a lot, and they're very expensive. You can get them on Logos for pretty cheap. You can get them on the internet for free because it's open access. But the point is, I have them. I just got to read them because I want that familiar understanding. So that's what's going on, man. That was my first week of this journey to a theological PhD. I feel a lot better than I did. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I feel like I'm actually excelling as opposed to just trying to tread water. I would be remiss to not mention one thing. Even though I was doing good in class, and I know God put me there, and He allowed me to excel, there was still one thing I was worried about, and that was the bill. Tuition was over $4,000 for the semester for these 2 classes, and the first semester is always hard because while my seminary that I work at, they like cover half of my tuition, but after I give them passing grades, I got to show them that I completed these classes with at least like a B or something, and then they'll reimburse me. But I got to come up with that money first. This has been a hard month. August was a financially hard month for me. So I was already thinking that I was going to have to drop these classes. No lie. I needed a miracle. I needed a miracle. And the other day, 2 days ago, the pastor at my church, he let me know. He was like, the church just approved a scholarship for your first semester in the amount of $2,100. So they covered half of my tuition already. That gives me 2 months to come up with the other 2,000, which is very doable. I can do that. I just couldn't get the 1,000 already or the 2,000 by the next one. So God always provides. If you are in accordance with His will, and that should be the main takeaway from this vlog. If you're in accordance with His will, He's going to give you what you need in order to succeed. I know God put me in this position. I know God has me in this PhD program for a reason. And because He brought me here, He wasn't going to bring me this far just to bring me this far. He was going to make sure I have everything I need in order to succeed and eventually do His will and spread His message and do work for the kingdom. So I just got to give all honor and glory to God. I want to say thank you to my church. And yeah, so I'm ready. I'm ready to tackle week 2. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and end this. I hope y'all are enjoying these. As I keep going on, I'll probably figure out how to make these a little bit better, a little more concise, take out a lot of the fluff and have maybe everything set up a little bit better. But like I said, it's also really just for me, and I hope my kids one day, they'll be able to look back and be like, man, you went through some crazy 1,000 pages a week. It was crazy. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And until next week, I'm going to be doing these on Friday from now on, because Saturday or Sunday after church, I don't know if my daughter's going to be here and I don't want to wake her up doing this. So I'm probably going to do these on Friday and upload them. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. And until next week, shalom. Mm, 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 mm.